Thanks for joining me on Sound Booth tutorials. For more stuff like this, head on over to All Buttons In, where I will go into this and other things in more depth over the coming weeks. Remember to subscribe. Hey folks, today I wanted to talk a little bit about how to prepare a song for another person who's going to mix your song. And that might be a producer or someone who is specifically a mixing engineer. Certainly getting your session properly prepared can save you a lot of money down the track because you're not relying on the mix engineer or the mix engineer's assistant to do a lot of that preparation for you. So it's always best to try and minimize that. So I'm just going to look at some of the ways that you can get your session prepared in such a way that it's a very smooth handover to the mix engineer. So as you can see in front of us here, we've got a session that was given to me, got a lot of edits and stuff in it. And in fact, there were other versions of this session that didn't open that had more stuff in them. And so what I want to do is encourage you to work in such a way that it completely takes the idea of a DAW taking over all your tracks and being a part of that process. You want to take the DAW, whether it be Logic, Cubase, whether it be Innuendo or Pro Tools, on Windows, on a Mac, take that out of the process completely. The reason we want to do that is because things just go wrong. As was the case here is that I opened up the latest session, or at least I tried to open up the latest session, and it wouldn't open on my computer. Now I'm running in Pro Tools 10, which is on Windows, and the person who gave me the session was running Pro Tools 10, but it was on a Mac. And whatever the differences were between our two systems, it just wouldn't open up. And there was nothing I could do apart from open up an older session, which was a lot more vacant. As you can see, it hasn't got much on it at all. And so I'll just move this bass down. And, you know, that can be really frustrating. So let's discuss some of the steps that you can take, and others I'll show you what you can do. So I'll just refer to my document here. So I need to talk about mixing versus engineering. And of course, a mix engineer is an engineer, but I see them as two different things. Being an engineer is, to me, more of a technical process because it involves fixing parts, adjusting the tonal balances, tuning vocals, adjusting timing, comping together multiple takes, whether that be multi-track drums or whatever. And of course, that involves editing and cleaning up edits, any clicks or pops, and then putting together a rough mix, a rough balance that is kind of in the ballpark. You know, a basic fader balance and some panning and stuff. All of these decisions might have been made during tracking, but essentially what we want to get to the point of is giving the mix engineer an idea of sonically what we're going after, and then having the mix engineer take over that and take it to the next level. Allow him to do his thing, not have to get technical at all, because I know that gets in the way of being creative. And that's one of the biggest strengths. It's the reason why you pay a mixing engineer. It's for his taste. It's not for how well he can clean up a snare drum. That's not the sole reason. You want someone who has a great ear and can really take that song from pretty good sounding to absolutely amazing. And the more you get these things out of the way, the easier it is for him to do his thing. And so let's look at editing. You know, editing's a pretty big one. Let's take a look at these drums in this session. Actually, I'll just play the song first so that you can hear it. Get the idea there. I'll just take a closer look here. As you can see, we've got rack 1, rack 2, and floor tom. And what's happened is that these have been chopped up so that it looks like, yes, the individual hits are not, like, for example, if we drag this out, this is common practice, by the way, to have the tom-toms cut out like this. So one way of editing them for drums is to slip it back here just before the hit of the close mic and then just have it fade out. Just the fade out. You know, and do that for all of your hits. I can see there's a hit there, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is one way to edit the drums. If you don't want the spill of the close mics interfering with what other balance you've got going, this is one way to deal with not having the spill. It's kind of like gating, but it's physically gating out so that it's only giving you the close mic hit, which is that. All right. So I mean that's a creative choice. Some people will leave all this spill in, and it depends on how well recorded it was. In this case, it looks like what they wanted was to have all those tom-toms separate. So all of the blue here is the drums. These ones here and these ones here, they go for the full length, whereas these are just shorter. And you'll see why. Because that's just a snare sample. These have been grouped. What I would do is I'm going to take snare machine out. That's just a sample. And I'm going to take out the edited rack toms. And what I want to do after that is, because I've now got all of these grouped properly together, drag them down here. And now I've only got all of these in the same group. And so the next step is, you know, in the studio, they've obviously been edited, but how well edited have they been? Well, we can see here that in terms of, just drag these out. You know, the start of the song doesn't start until there. So there's no point in having any of that. It's important to ensure that the crossfade is correct. I'm going to triple click here, and that's going to select the whole lot all the way to the end. If you just click twice, it just selects that. 3 clicks will get you the whole lot. And then I go Control or Command F, and I'm going to change these from equal power to equal gain. I'll get it to adjust the ones that are already there. I feel like the equal gain work better with drum editing. And just going to clean it up to that point there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off tab to transient. And what that does is it allows me to tab to regions. I'll show you what I mean by that. Instead of, if we left it on, we would tab to the loudest point, which is that. Well, that's what it's detecting as the loudest point on the hi-hats. So by turning it off, we go to the next region, and you can see here that it hasn't actually been edited very well. It's actually chopping out all of the sound for that split second. That could work, but I don't feel like it's a good practice to do that, especially if you've got a wash of cymbals that can interfere with how that feels. And so the way I'm doing it is I just go in, zoom in, get it as close to the front end of that whole group, and then drag it back to there because that's as far as we can go, and then just do a small crossfade and tab to the next bit. It looks like we've got a bit of funny stuff going on here. Let's delete that. Let's delete that, and then we'll drag that out, drag it back, crossfade. And you know, this applies to anything, not just multi-track drums, but I'm showing you multi-track drums because this is probably the hardest thing to deal with. So this is an example of the type of prep that you would do to edit your song. Clean up all your edits, and once you've done that, it's a good idea, you know, you get your basic fader balances and, you know, pan things that need to be panned, etc. And just do a bounce to disk, triple click, and start it where the song starts. And that will give your mix engineer an idea of what you want it to sound like. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Okay, we're back and it's giving me the option to bring it into the session. And there it is, rough mix. So I'm just going to pull that down to there, pull it down there and mute it. Now, if you've got a lot of processing on tracks and you're not sure whether the mix engineer would be able to recreate that, or you've got some automation or something like that, it's a good idea to print the effects or the plugin onto the track. You know, if you had, say, Bass Rider on the bass guitar, what I would do is you've got that set the way you want it, and then I would go and save that setting as a preset. Once you've got your preset, you go into Audio Suite, pick your plugin, you pick your preset, blah, blah, blah. You hit render, it renders that out, and you've got that as a version, okay? But before you do that, what I recommend doing is, if we want to give the mix engineer the option to use the effects version or not, or even use parts of both, what you can do is duplicate that track, rename it, call this one effects, and now you've got one where you can print the effects on. So that's a way you can embed your effects into the track, and you can give the producer both of them. Now, in terms of giving the files over, this is the big part. As I explained, I had some issues with that recently, and I think the way around that is to take completely the DAW out of the issue. And the only way to do that I know of is to consolidate the audio and export it as is. You literally go to your groups, you select all, I'm going to triple click here. The shortcut is Alt-Shift-3 or Option-Shift-3. And then once this is finished, this is going to give complete files that start at the very beginning of the same point. And that's important because when the mix engineer brings that into his session, it's all going to line up perfectly. Just take these groups off. So, you know, the hi-hat track relative to the kick out, relative to the kick in, that's all going to match up. I think it serves to give a good overview. And then of course, if they want to listen to the rough mix, they've got it there ready to go. So it's worth noting here that, you know, if you go scanning down here, the only two stereo tracks we've got are these ones. And so I'm just going to select all the ones that are mono. And we're going to hit Control-Shift-K or Command-Shift-K on a Mac. And then we've got an option here. We want to export as WAV. That's always a safe bet. Definitely not MP3. And because we know that they're all mono tracks, we can go multiple mono. And we're going to pick where we're going to save them. I'm going to use this folder here. And use current folder. And that will export all of the files in such a way that they'll all line up no matter what DAW you're using. And so it looks like as it's doing that, it's actually making all of those mono tracks, which is what we want. The last thing you want is stereo versions of what are essentially mono tracks. So they're done. And that leaves the last two, which are both stereo. Same thing, Control-Shift-K. Go through, we want to choose interleaved so that we're getting a stereo file. Not going to change any of that. And we're going to send it to the same folder. Bang. And so that way, all of these files, they all start at a common point. And I'll just bring it into a new session. Go import audio, Control-Shift-I, and we get into our folder and we find all of the audio that we need. Shift and selecting all of that. We're going to copy the files across. We're in the same sample rate for this session. They should all load up. Use current folder. And once that's finished, we click OK. And as the mix engineer, I'm very happy because what I'm seeing is everything for that session lining up. And I've got the rough mix in there. Go in and have a listen. As the person passing along the files, you would be informing the mix engineer of the correct tempo. And I know that the correct tempo is 87. And so the next step, if you're the mix engineer, is to go in, find the start of the music, and then kind of figure out roughly where it starts. Watch the counter. and get to work on your mix and make it sound amazing. As an added step, before you export, I'll just get back into this other session. Before you do the export, it's worth taking the time perhaps to go through and clean up the names of things, and we can maybe name it something more meaningful, guitar 1, guitar 2. And when you do eventually do that Control-Shift-K to export the audio, it will name it accordingly. So there's some tips if you're passing your work on to a mix engineer. It's all there. It's all ready to go. The mix engineer can just get in and balance it and get to work doing what he does best. So some of you might be aware that I'm running a competition on my other channel, which is All Buttons In, and we'll be taking song submissions every month, and whoever wins the competition will get their song mixed. And this is a good way of presenting your mix in the best light so that someone like me can get straight down to work and really get connected with the song and make it sound great. Until next time, happy mixing. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for new tutorials or require mixing services, please email me at yamahadrums2009@hotmail.com, and please subscribe to remain informed of future video releases.